Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's May 4th, 2023. This is a meeting of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors Finance Committee, and we have one item on the agenda. It is the general fund budget update for 23-24. And we'll begin with a presentation by our business administrator, Mr. Rapp. And I think it makes perfect sense for board members to interrupt and ask questions as we go along. I would ask two things. One is that you try to hold it to one or two questions at a time so everybody gets a chance. And secondly, that you ask the chair to be recognized so we have some sort of sense of order. We'll start by going around the table to my left, and I'm Ed Tate, chairing this evening's meeting, Council Rock School Board.
Mary Ann McKee, School Board.
Heather Biden, School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Ed Salomon, School Board.
Matt Federickson, IT Director.
Anthony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Anthony Devlin, Director of Special Services.
Nicole Crawford, Director of Elementary Education.
Al Funk, Director of Secondary Education.
All right, thank you, everyone. Mr. Rapp.
I wanted to start off before I begin my presentation. One of the things that came up in the last meeting was getting information to the board. And I wanted to let you know the treasurer's report, and the treasurer's report that we submit every month, there's a schedule in there that shows the budget to actual schedule for the year. And so if anybody needs me to go through that file with them, it's the same every month, and it does show you, but by type of account. So you can see like there's for student transportation, there's a code in there, and it shows you, how much has been spent so far this year, what was expected to be spent, and how much it's either over or under budget. And there's a lot of information in there. So I do want you to know about that so that you're better informed throughout the year that's available to you.
Thank you. I omitted to introduce the two people on the phone. Go ahead and introduce yourselves, please.
Christine Taylor, Director of HR.
Christine Taylor, yeah, that worked well. My error. Sorry, Christine Taylor, Director of HR, and Steve Nomos, School Board. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, getting started, in the wrong direction. So I'm going to talk first about local revenues and where we are. The local revenues are where we get the majority, as you all know, is where we get the majority of our funding from. We have earned income tax, which is probably our second biggest, largest local income. Maybe it's exceeded by. Usually it's the second largest, but I've talked about this before, where it's difficult to predict post-pandemic. So it's really difficult at this stage to say, what we're going to get from that tax every year at this point. So, we like to budget conservatively. We really try to budget that conservatively right now because again, with the pandemic, we don't know where that's going to end up as people go back to work in Philadelphia and from out of their homes. The occupation tax, and this one is kind of it's going to be flat or it's going to decrease. It's a tax on an individual based upon their job. So the tax is really never going to go up unless we have a large influx of people with higher tax professions. But it's not really a place where we're looking to help keep up with inflation. It's difficult to ensure that we have all taxpayers. If someone's living in an apartment and they're renting, we might not get that information that they've moved into the district to get their position, so we can add them to the tax. But I guarantee you, people that are moving out of the town, out of the school district, are telling us that they're moving out. And it is based upon an outdated system. It's an old system where the thinking process was a long time ago that certain professions were guaranteed to make a lot more money than others, and that's not true anymore. You know, you think an attorney might have made a lot of money 30 years ago, but now they don't, you know, their attorneys don't make that same kind of money, so you have different, you know, different, it's not based on any sort of modern system, and also the rates have not changed in a long time. When we get these rates from the county, we don't make them, you know, we're directed to get these rates from the county. So this is really a tax that, you know, I don't see a whole lot of growth here in the future, and, you know, we can't really use that to help, you know, keep up with inflation throughout the years. Real estate transfer tax, again, this is a tax that depends on the home market. It is usually a pretty good home market. Obviously, if the market slows or declines, there'll be a decrease, but you know, the school district usually does well, but again, it's not really, unless, you know, at home, there is a slight increase depending on sales and value of sales, but it's not something that you can really predict from year to year. So that leaves us with real estate tax. We all know that's our largest revenue source. It's probably our easiest to predict. It is our easiest to predict local revenue. But we do always want to budget this conservatively, because you don't want to be in a position where it's fine to budget 75 million and get 76, but it's not a great situation to be in where you budget 75 and you get 74. So we always try to be a little, you know, on the low side of what we're predicting. As we all know, it can be burdensome on fixed incomes, and I'll tell you, this week I received our property tax reduction allocation. It is $177,000 less than it was last year, and that adds up to about $9 per homestead. So every homestead, every taxpayer who has a homestead is going to pay about $9 more based on the current numbers. And that is mainly because, you know, we benefited from people working from home, you know, in the earned income tax, because we had less people paying that tax in Philly. Well, there's a portion of this allocation that comes from how much we lose because of people working in Philadelphia. So as we gain from that, we suffer a little bit on this end. So I think it's called the Sterling. So I just want to, you know, bring people listening that this is kind of where we're at, where if we need more money, we need to look at, you know, this is really the only area that we have a lot of control over revenue. And with inflation the way it is, we have to, you know, keep our eye on this, and don't have a lot of other places to go right now. So getting into that, what this is a projection of results over the next 5 years. You can see we have the current year budget, and then we project starting with the year of 2028. This projection is a baseline with no tax increase, and I want to be very clear that the projection has very limited intervention. So we're not increasing taxes, we're not looking at state revenue increases. The only increase that really goes into revenue increase are certain things that we can reasonably predict are going to happen that we don't control, such as assessed values are going to increase. So we say that assessed values increase by 0.01% every year. Or I'm sorry, it is 0.1% every year. And so that's really the only revenue increase. So I don't want people to be alarmed when you look at you know, the net operating result. And so you can see, but the expenditures, we do feel that that's an accurate prediction of what's going to happen. This includes retirement, reductions from retirement. It also includes increases for contractual increases, both with our employees and with our third-party vendors. And I just want to also point out that they used to have debt service on this line, but since we moved it to the debt service fund, it is now actually in the transfers out, which is shown down here below, and that's just a separate thing that is included in the expenditures line. So it's not on the bottom under. This is just showing you what the transfers out are, and that is really our amount of debt service in the current with our current debt. Actually, and this does include our anticipated debt issuance for next year of 2024. So again, and then it shows use of fund balance, but This is with no intervention, so we're not worried about the use of fund balance here. I'm just showing you where our deficits lie. You know, what kind of deficits we're looking at with no tax increases here. This is actually pretty close to what I talked about last meeting. The $7.6 million, that does not include, well, first of all, we have a project for whiteboards that we're going to use the educational initiatives fund balance there. So that is going to remain as an expense, but we are planning on using fund balance for that. And then it also does not include the $1 million transfer I talked about from the healthcare fund balance to the general fund, where we're still looking into that, whether, you know, the practicality of that transfer. So right now that's not included in here, but so it's about 6.3 million, which is where I was at last meeting. So any questions on this slide? Or comments?
Well, I just think the revenue looks like it's stagnated, not going down over 5 years.
I'm sorry?
The revenue is stagnant, it doesn't really increase.
Yeah,
It'd be very
good.
conservative. What are the parameters that got you to those numbers?
I'd say about 0.1% of an increase in assessments. So that increases the taxable, you know, the amount that we get on that, especially for new construction, and you know what that adds. There's a few, it's like a state revenue, a couple of state revenue items that are very predictable, such as transportation subsidy, and some of our wages. The wages increase, our Social Security payments are going to, and retirement payments are going to increase, but as well the amount that we receive for them are also going to increase. So there's nothing in there. What I'm trying to show here is that nothing in that is increasing. It's something.
0% tax increase, which means the main revenue stays the same, because our main revenue comes from real estate taxes. The assumption is 0% tax increase, that's why the revenue should increase.
The story that this slide says to me is that, number one, our expenses are growing faster than our revenues are growing. And effectively, I'm hoping this isn't where the administration is setting up a game of chicken effectively that says that there is no way for us to reduce our expenses, and the only way out of this is to raise taxes, when 3/4 of our constituents are taxpayers that don't have kids coming to a school. And effectively, this is also the cause of the effect of inflation. We have the taxpayer is also a consumer and is feeling this at the pump, in the groceries, eating out, eating in, everywhere in shape and form. Businesses pass along the effects of inflation to their consumers. And effectively, this is what's happening with us. We're going to be doing the same thing. So you were right to say that this is very difficult on a fixed budget. I mean, I hope that that's not our position, is that Council Rock has no ability to make cuts and no ability to reduce expenses, and the only way out of this is to raise taxes. That's unsustainable, whether it's now or whether it's future, because if we have to rely on a tax increase to balance the budget, pretty soon that's not going to work either. And that's what I see when I see this.
I mean, this is just the first thing, and there's a lot of things that we're going to show as we go throughout this.
I know, but that's what this slide says.
Well, the purpose of this slide, that's not the purpose of this slide. The purpose of this slide is simply to say no tax increases at all is where no tax increases, no further cuts leads us to here. This is where, you know, this is basically the most reasonable projection that I can do as far as that situation. So there's no other statement then for your, and I show you this so that you can compare it to some of the other things that I show on the other slides. Good job.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. you were talking about the earned income tax.
Yes.
That's generated by the county?
No, it's generated by,
Oh,
that's what, like, so the 1% of everyone that works in some people that work, it's an income tax.
oh, no, wait, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of,
Occupation tax.
I'm thinking of the occupation tax.
Yes. And I'm sorry.
The, you know,
The county gives us the rates, and they're supposed to give us I believe it's the county that tells us where, you know, well, the tax rolls tell us where they're located, but we're not gonna get that kind of information from the tax roll, but if it's someone who's renting a house or an apartment, but, you know, we might be able to get it from other, but it's no longer a great rate to do a tax, I would say. I mean,
right, but you were saying there hasn't been any adjustments to that
in a long time.
in,
Yeah.
what is a long time? Any
I
idea? I mean, I have an idea, because I pay the same amount every August, I get the same bill.
most likely 30 years. I can't say.
So, if you're a doctor, you've been paying $200 for the last 30 years?
Yes. Yes.
And that's general, what percentage of that, I mean?
It's about $4 million a year. So, but, you know, there's no, you know, every other item that grows, you know, it grows. The more it helps our situation. You know. So, you know, if this had a decent increase every year, that would definitely, you know, relieve some of the budgetary pressure that we have. There are ways to replace this, and I can talk about that if you like, but.
I was going to ask that question. To your point, Bob, I asked about ways to adjust these taxes other than the real estate tax, and there is a complicated mechanism that involves a referendum that
Yes.
Mr. Rapp explained to us.
So you would need a referendum to, so you would look at this tax, what we're receiving this tax 2 years ago, and then you would calculate what we would have to raise our EIT taxes, earned income taxes, to get to this same point. So if we made $4 million in this tax 2 years ago, we would then have to calculate what percent we would have to raise EIT to make $4 million. And then we would then have to get that on the ballot as a referendum, and the voters would have to vote on it and decide whether or not that they wanted this. And by doing that, we would be completely abolishing the occupation tax, but we would be adding additional earned income tax. Now, the thing about that, the benefit to the district is earned income tax, as it grows, it's going to now grow at a higher percentage. So in the first year, it's revenue neutral. We're not going to make any more money from this than we would have in the past. As a matter of fact, we'd probably lose about $10,000 because it's a little more costly to collect earned income than it is to collect occupation tax. So it's about $50,000 versus $60,000 collections for that difference. But beyond that, and it has been voted on in the district twice, and both times it has failed. So last time was 2013, it was about 8,000 against the 6,000. So just in the interest of.
Sure. I mean, and yeah, just a quick note of that, like as Mr. Roosevelt mentioned, I mean, we keep working on the revenue side of things as opposed.
Yeah,
but we'll go from there. Okay, thanks. I just wanted the clarification.
Okay. So then this is simply a slide showing all the same parameters, except for this is enough of a tax increase each year to balance the budget. And again, in 2024, I'm showing you that there's still a $1.3 million deficit, but I've explained why between these two other reasons why that's still going to be higher because of what we're spending. And again, this is just an example of where we would need to balance the budget every year just based on that. Okay?
That this sheet?
We can get to that.
Ultimately, that's that?
Yeah, that's that. I do have a slide that I'm going to get to that shows what those rates are. And then, so I have a graph here just to show. The red line is projected expenditures. The solid blue line is projected expenditures, or projected revenues with no tax increase. The solid red and the solid blue line will be in each of these slides that I show you, just as a comparison, not for any other reason, to show you where revenue would be compared to no tax increase. And the dotted blue line, and you can't really see on this one because it merges with the red line because we're not having a deficit is right along the same as the expenses. So that's keeping up with expenses as they're projected right now. And then this next slide is the same thing. The solid green and the solid orange are, the solid green is the fund balance for the general fund, and the solid orange is the result, so how close it is to a surplus or a deficit. So you can see that it shows zero here, so you can see that the fund balance would be not where the fund balance, the decrease in fund balance. Balanced budget keeps the fund balance at the same level. It also keeps our annual results at around zero. And again, the solid green and the solid orange will be on every slide in the same position. And this slide shows you the tax increases that would be necessary to balance the budget. And what I'm trying to show here is that the tax increase is not, although it's higher in the first year, you can see that it goes down as you go on. Obviously, it is multiplicated how as a tax rate, a higher tax increase in the first year. Like I would say, the more you raise it earlier, the less you have to raise it in the future. Obviously, that's pretty logical, but I think this demonstrates that's where that's.
Tony, do you have a slide with the historical data over the years, how much we increased?
I did not send it.
I do not have it.
Yeah.
How much we raised tax?
Yeah. This is just my work. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, but it's the actuals, right?
Yeah.
It's
So
not-
that's
not
as
your-
I could, yeah.
It's the actuals, you are not making, you didn't make it up.
If I could.
Yes, sir.
So on this, just using this slide for instance, when does our various contracts run out on each one of those years?
The CRDA contract runs out at the end of 25. And I believe Crestwood right around the same. And CRAA is, I believe, next year. But
ABM?
Well, ABM is 3 years, so that would be 25 as well, or 26 actually. No, 25. And the terms would be 2029. 2029. That's 7 years from the year that went out.
And on this slide, none of the taxes that you identify are anywhere close, except for the first year is the IFO numbers, for Act 1 index.
Yes.
And we don't know what's going to be in the future, right?
Well,
We go out.
we do know that the Act 1 index will increase next year and probably in September.
Because of inflation.
Everything that I read says that Act 1 index will continue to increase for the foreseeable future.
Mr. Tate, for the record, I believe Dr. Thorwald's on the phone as well.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Solomon.
You're welcome.
I just sent everybody the history that I compiled of property tax increases, and as far as I could go back, the Act 1 index for the same year.
Could you go over it?
Sure. I can tell you what they were going back to 96. 0%, 3.02%, 3.29%. And then 0%, 0% again in 2000, 0% again in 2001. 2002 was 12.4%. 2003 was 8.23. 2004 was 5.51. 2005 was 1.23. 2006, 3.52. 2007, 3.95. 2008, 3.85. 2009, 2.42. 2010, 2.52. 2011, 0. 2012, 1.7, 2013, 1.3, 2014, 0.61, 15 was 1.9, 16 was 2.4, 17 was 2.5, 18 was 2.4, 19 was 2.2, 2020 was 3.1, and 2021 was 1.99, and last year was 1.25. So there's a lot of fluctuation.
And according to your data here, the Act 1 index went into effect in 2011.
That's as far back as I could find, yeah.
So you couldn't raise it beyond the Act 1 index unless you went for
We never did, because that requires referendum. In most years, our tax increases were very close to the Act 1 index. In fact, matched it, I see 5 years in a row.
And the average, from what I recall, you indicating from this same chart last year was around 2.5 or something like that.
It was around 2.5, yeah. I think to me, the biggest lesson was when we had 3 years of 0% tax increases. 99, 2000, 2001. Then in 2002, we had a tax increase of 12.4%. And in 2003, it was 8.23%.
That was probably anything related to the building of South.
Yeah.
Probably, that's what South felt.
And we were doing elementary schools at the same time.
Can I ask, because apparently I'm not sure exactly how it worked back then. So when you want to have a built-in built, you issue bonds or you get a bank loan. You don't pay from your budget, right? You just pay, your budget pays for the debt service, correct?
Yes, and we've been trying, one of the things Rob talked to you about before I came on, we try to keep our debt payments at the same level every year, or less. So right now the taxpayers are paying that $18 million. I mean, that's the taxpayers.
The debt service.
We are paying that from the general fund. So what we get from taxes helps pays for that. Depending on with our removal of with our it is going down. If you go back to this slide, you can see that we're at. This is our normal expected debt payment, and it does start to decrease even with the bond issue next year.
Does this assume that our rating will remain the same? Because if our rating goes down, we may have to pay more to borrow?
Well, our rating, if our next bond issue will be based on this year's
Thinking
financial
about down
statement.
the road. I'm not talking
Well, it's not,
about-
it would affect new borrowings, it wouldn't affect our old borrowings. So what we pay in interest on those bonds isn't gonna change. It's not like, your credit rating goes down and they can, credit card companies raise your interest rate. This is, our credit rating is what our credit rating is when we borrow the money in the state.
So if we want to renovate the school down the road, say 5 years from now, 3 years from now, how do we have to raise taxes to do that? Or we just issue bonds and then?
I would say you should probably, I have to see the numbers for what we'd have to pay in debt service in beyond that period. So if we wanted to build a school in 2028, you know, if we had to borrow more, we had to borrow to the point where we're paying more in debt service than 18.7 million, which is around where we want it to be, then we would have to raise taxes to pay that.
But that would be a continuum, right? It's not like a one-time thing.
No, yes, it would be continuing, and it would be the same every year.
If I could? So I wanted to bounce back to the beginning where you said that we have the year-to-date, budget reports that come out each year.
Yes.
And I looked at it, so, I just want to make sure I have the right numbers, because what you could do is you could take, so I did a quick Excel sheet, so it's $258 million budget. Just divided by 12, it's like 21 million, $21.5 million linear for 12 months. And then I look at where we would be at March with remaining budget, it would be, and I believe that the current report for April was for the end of March.
Yes.
Okay, so that we had, if I did the calculation, we would have like 60, and you can help me out, make sure I do this right, and this is what I'll ask
We have
for.
$60 million.
$64 million in fund balance. I mean, not fund balance, in remaining budget, right?
We have, well,
We have
would-
70.
if, yes, but that's because there's, and I've, talked about this before, there's so many moving parts. So we have a lot of our money that we're gonna receive this year. We have a lot of that, but we still have the majority of the money that we're gonna get for the rest of the year is either state money or some more earning. We have all our real estate tax, we have local occupation tax, we have most of our federal money.
I'm not talking about I'm not talking about revenue, I'm talking about the expenditures. Because what I was thinking from my standpoint,
Okay, I'm sorry.
when I'm thinking about budget and what we're going to do for a tax increase, I'd really like to have an idea of where we stand on the current year budget. Because if we come in hot with a surplus again and we just raise taxes too much, I'd like to take that into consideration. That's why I'm trying to gauge where we stand here today. And I do understand some expenditures come in after the deadline.
Yes.
And then in July and August, we're still going to have some of those. So, but what I was looking at from the numbers that, I created from the numbers that are out at the report is that $76 million left in revenue available budget as of the end of March. And if I do just a linear chart where we were just cutting it up 12 months even, we have a course. So I'm seeing about 64, let's go back. Basically, it's about $12 million to the good going into just doing basic math for projected budget of where you would be if it was linear.
Yes.
But this is expenditures, so I don't expect that to bump in or bump out or be radical like revenue. It's pretty, most of that is set.
Yes.
So that's what I'm trying to think. I think I would like to know how, with only 2 months left, we can see if this is telling me true, where are we going to spend $12 million more than over budget in the next 4 months?
Well, one of the things that we're going to have, we will book to the end of the year is we haven't paid our, so we're just ending some March, we haven't paid our first quarter 2023 retirement yet, and that's a large sum. And then we have to pay our largest portion of that, and we don't pay that till September, the largest portion for the second quarter of 2023. We don't actually pay that till September, but we accrue it at July 1st, so that's like.
Do we know what those numbers are roughly? And then we can subtract that from 12 million. Just to kind of get an idea.
I tried so hard to get you.
You
Give
did?
me a number.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
Probably 10 million?
It's tough. 10 million, okay, so we're looking at maybe 2 million to a flat budget, but we won't be over. And I heard the budget was terrible last year.
Like, well, yes, and, well, but the budget was fixed, a lot of it was fixed as well. And,
Well, that's the tough part, is we try to make judgments based on, you know, without knowing where we actually stand today. But it's a long-term fix, I got it, we'll
Well,
figure it out. I think we're gonna be okay this year, because the last 2 to 3 years have been pretty good. I think it's winding down, and I think we're gonna start seeing it go the other way. So it's okay to think like that, but that's what the trends seem to be showing.
well, I can tell you, so I did a methodology to try to predict what it was going to be. So what I did was I took 2022, where we were on revenues and expenses at the end of 2022. And then I took where we were in revenues and expenses for the first 9 months of 2022, which was through March, of the 2022 school year, which was through March. I figured out what percentage of the total of each account that was. And then I calculated, then I applied that percentage to where we are at the end of March in 2023. And that's where I came up with we're about $1 million, $1 million worth of surplus.
Right.
I did the same thing at the end of April, and it shows about $30 million surplus. So that's how, I'm just saying to give you an idea of how unreliable these types of measurements are, because I used the same measurement in 1 month as the next month, and the result was completely volatile. So any amount that I give you is likely to be wrong.
How did you get 30 million? So I said, I just did something based off of 2 months left. And the actual numbers of what was actually spent and what's left, $76 million, that's the numbers. No doubt, that's what's left in the budget.
Well, but it's not 6 months left, it's not 2 months left. We do
3
pay,
months, sorry.
we do pay a lot of our teachers in 2 pays in July and 1 pay in August. So that
Still
also
gets
included back to this year, which has to be accrued. So
Yeah,
there's.
all that can be put into a projection. But I think you're doing a great job. Look, I'm telling you, what my hold is, I'm just trying to get an idea of where we're gonna land today. You don't see that we are gonna be out of whack come the end of this year. You really can't commit to an idea. And that's fine, because it might take time, experience in the position to feel comfortable.
I would tell you most of the people that have been in this position.
Hey, can I interrupt for a second?
Go ahead, Mike.
Just for a second. Can the rest of the people on the phone please mute your phone so I can hear the meeting? Thanks.
Yeah.
What?
That everybody else on the conference call should mute their phones. All right.
Please.
Move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is a 3% tax increase each year, and again, just to show you effects of different ideas for your edification. This is the same numbers, only a 3% tax increase. It shows more of a deficit this year, a deficit next year, and then it's surplus in the following 3 years. And again, I think that shows the multiplicative effect of a certain tax. Whereas you get to a certain level, and the higher it is, the more it will increase your revenues. And you compare this to no tax increase. Again, same lines. Except for now the blue line. The dotted blue line goes above expenditures and stays crosses in 2025 and stays above it for the rest. And same with fund balance is actually shown with the balanced budget. It was shown to stay level. It actually increases, and results of operation are also increasing, which I think you could see that also on the numerical side. This is the same thing, but 2% tax increase each year. One thing I would say is this is pretty close to, if you notice that 2% is the amount that keeps your, remember this is like about $1 million last year, so it keeps the deficit at the same level, close to the same level every year. That's pretty much, staying status quo with where we are now. This is pretty much keeping the deficit each year level.
Yes, good question. Thanks. Quick question, is the Act 1 index DAR members at 4.1 this year?
4.1 this year.
Thank you.
This is the same thing, and comparing that scenario where you can see that the revenue line stays pretty much, that gap is about the same every year between expenditures and revenue. And the fund balance obviously is going to go down, but that's if the only thing we do is use fund balance, which obviously is not going to be what we do over that period, and the results of operations increase slight, or pretty much stay the same. That's kind of deceptive. I don't think it moves up as much as it looks like it moves up.
Yeah.
You can see where the fund balance decreases, but slower. And then the last scenario is a 1% tax increase each year. And you can see, this is not that far off from a 0% tax increase. Just for your information, to say that, it gets higher. You're not at the same rate, but when you start getting into 2028, it gets closer to that same rate. And the gap between revenues and expenses gets wider every year, and the fund balance falls off, as well as the results of operations. So that's the target should be a tax scenario. We can talk about fund balance and use of fund balance and where you want to go with that. I would say I would like to keep a use of fund balance. If we're going to do that, somewhere around $2 million, I'd be willing. I think we'd be safe-ish to go as high as 3. And the thought process there is that if we do better than budgeted, which with a conservative budget we would expect that, but we would get some of that fund balance back. So that's where I kind of feel with the fund balance. So I wanted to make sure that you knew where I was with the fund balance, with the use of fund balance in this year. I would say if you ask me what tax increase I would prefer, I'd say make my life easier and do Act 1 every year. But obviously, but I would say that my recommendation for this year at least would be at least 2%, and we can augment that with some use of fund balance. And there are some other items that we're still finding some items as we clean up. We're still not where we should be in the budget process by now, but we're still finding some items. So there might be some more additional items that we can reduce it by and not have to use fund balance. As far as areas of the budget where expenses aren't as high as we expected them to be, such as a program that maybe was budgeted for more than we expected to pay this year. So.
Could you show us your recommendation, the 2%? What it means? Could you show us?
Go back to 2%. I think it was,
yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. So 2% keeps us, Again, I say that's that, like, it's almost like a magic number where it keeps us close to where we want to be. You know, and then when we get the next year, I know we want to try to project it better, but I almost think like if you're looking at 24, or 25 next year, we should be looking at the 23 increase, not necessarily the 24, just because of the volatility of that. But, you know, so, you know, that's what a 2% increase every year looks like.
Okay, so 2% this year means for 2024, we are using 4.3 million from our fund balance to balance our budget, right?
No.
So our fund balance goes down to 16.9, right? No?
I'm saying,
Because that does not,
well, I explained that, first of all, 4 million is not, we still have the transfer that we're considering, and we still have, there is a use of fund balance related to educational initiatives, which some of that is in there, but there are, you know, so there are a few other items that we're still looking at, like I said, that would bring that down even further.
to about 3 million?
Less than 3 million.
Okay, so how we gonna, where are we gonna find the 3 million?
Well,
Because this is not the balanced budget, right?
yes, this is not the balance budget,
Okay,
no.
so where do we find the 3 million? Where? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had not.
No, sorry.
Oh.
Where can we find 3 million? I mean, like I said, we could use some fund balance for that. The transfer that we've discussed, no, that's not part of that, I apologize. I mean, we're getting into programs, which is not that I'm not trying to duck your question, but you know, we have to be in programs to get there. That's where we have to be.
I mean, if you make a recommendation, you have to support it. Like, you have to explain, I recommend 2%, and we're going to balance the budget by doing this and this and this and this, right? And here, I don't see what we're, I mean, I know we come up with ideas, but I don't see how we're going to balance it. Because we do have balanced budget. I mean, this is by law, right? We're required to have a balanced budget. Where we're going to find the money, we have to.
No, his recommendation, I believe, is to use fund balance to cover it and not cuts.
No, I asked that and he said no.
No, I said we use the fund balance
Okay.
with the hope that, with the plan that we do better than budgeted and we cover that both this year and next year.
So, I'm sorry. So if we do that, and then we increase 2% every year,
Yes.
according to this thinking, by the next few years, our fund balance will almost disappear. And that would be, we have no cushion because we are required to have at least, was it 5% or 10%? So we go even below, and then if we want to like issue bonds, what kind of rating are we going to have? I mean, I see what you're saying, but I see there's long-term implications of that recommendation. It's not, it doesn't look pretty right now.
Joe?
Thank you. To answer the question.
Yoda?
Yeah?
Yoda, one thing that happens every year with the conservative budgeting is we never use the fund balance we say we're going to use, ever. This will be the first year, and I would argue this was not a conservative budget year. And so while we say we're using $3 or $4 million, our revenues outpace our expenses, usually that delta. So that's how it's been done year after year after year.
But this year we have under budgeted our expenses, as we know.
I would say we always do. I have not been on this board where there wasn't some fund balance plugged in to balance the budget, that didn't reappear at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's what I'm getting at. Because Tony's always going to be 1 or 2% to the good because he's being conservative, which he should be.
Yeah. Mike, are you done?
Yes, sir.
Steve wanted to speak. Steve?
Thanks, Ed. So just a couple comments. One is maybe there's a way to cross-check with the state taxing system to see like who's really living in our school districts. We talked about that a little bit. You guys talked about that a little bit earlier during the call. To really see like who is here and are we getting those tax dollars that we're entitled to. And then number two is and I haven't heard this through the discussion. I mean, our largest expenses are personnel, and what I want to say is, are we as efficient with the number of people that we have, working in this system, as we can be? So how do we compare with other, school districts where we have, relatively the same number of students and the same quality of education metrics, demographics, things like that. So I think we need to look at that as well. So just my 2 comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Joe?
Now, right, I'm going to answer your question, where does the money come from? So as Mike said, I mean, just to piggyback off what he was saying, when Bob Reinhardt was here, we would under budget the revenues and basically be a little aggressive with the expenditures, and then they'd end up just where they were supposed to be. So don't feel because you see the red number that's where we're going to end up being. But where does the money go? Where are we going to get $3 million from if you want to balance a budget? So basically, he touched upon it. People talk about cutting programs, you're cutting the number of people, the personnel, or you are raising taxes. And the one that we don't talk about enough, which I've always been a creative advocate for, and obviously we don't talk about this stuff in public, but is, the biggest chunk is when we go and make an agreement how much those contracts will go up. And it happens every 3, 4, 5 years, and it's a difficult conversation. We're doing a great job of maintaining good relationships, but I think that is where collective bargaining is where you have to raise taxes 2% to keep up with the contractual agreements that we signed off on. That's literally how it works. And then the only way you're going to change that is by renegotiating next time around to understand where we are, that it's either you negotiate your money or how you pay out or that part, or we end up realizing that maybe we'll lose some of the people out of the unit. You might have to cut personnel, you might have to cut. The last thing we want to do is cut programs. We can get more efficient and more creative and maybe change directions, and that's a great thing, but everything is going up in price. Inflation, software, you name it. Any of the technologies that we use, the cost to do business is going up. So the biggest thing that we only have one shot at it. It's usually done in 3 or 4 months, and it's always a new board, and nobody knows what they're doing. It's just like we're not professional. We rely on the lawyers to tell you what to do, and I'm not getting into any shady spot here. But what I'm trying to tell you is that's where the biggest, whatever you agree to in a contract, you have to realize that revenue is going to have to be made up with in taxes, because you can't always help. You've got to realize there's going to be rainy days some days, and we're not going to always have a good flow of income from revenues. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may. I agree with a lot of what you said. I completely disagree with your point about we don't discuss it in public. I mean,
I'm saying collective bargaining we cannot discuss in public.
We do. When we get the results from the collective bargaining back to the board, we have a tentative agreement. The board discusses it in public. I mean, you don't negotiate in public, but you do.
That's what I mean. When I talk about it, believe me, it's transparent. It's posted. Everybody gets 30 days to look at it.
And
that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, personnel is the biggest driver of our budget. It's around 70% all told, which is where we ought to be spending our money. I mean, to me, I'd rather be spending money on people than buildings or other things. I had a couple of questions. First of all, Tony, does this plan include the 1.3 million from the healthcare fund? Are we planning to use that?
The 1.3, well, it's 2 million, where, and I talked about this last month, so there's two
Right.
parts. One part is a 4% reduction in premiums
Right.
for both the district and the employees.
Right.
Which sounds kind of counterintuitive a little bit, but what we're saying, we're using healthcare, about $1 million of the healthcare fund balance to cover that savings.
Okay.
So that's not coming out of the general fund. So healthcare premiums and have been reduced in those expenses in this year only. We don't, we're showing a 2% increase after that.
Right.
Because we have to be more realistic and we can't send that fund balance down to nothing. We have to.
Yeah, I think that
be
was it.
conservative with that. And then we're considering $1 million transfer of healthcare fund balance to the general fund to help cover health insurance or other health insurance costs this year.
So that's another $1 million we might be able to use.
Yes, and that's what I said, that's not included. So to get closer to where we were,
Right.
where I was talking about last week, that's on this one, the 7.6 million, subtract $1 million for the transfer,
Right.
and another 336,000, I believe, for the white boys.
Right.
That's fund balance that we should be using for
Yeah.
something like that.
No, okay, that's good. You answered my question.
So then a 2% tax increase is about a little over $3 million, and then, use of fund balance plus some other.
Right. The other thing I'd ask Dr. Sanko to walk us through a little bit is we've had discussion, we've heard a lot about the efforts that you and the cabinet and administrators have made to pare down expenditures. It sounds like you've put a lot of work into reducing the expenditure line.
So, yeah, so thank you. So that work started with Nicole, Al, and Anthony. We've met repeatedly with our principals, with our coordinators. We've gone through everyone's budget line by line. I think I mentioned this last time. We found things from as seemingly insignificant as a $65 subscription to $25,000, and we've gone back at least 3 times with each coordinator, each special ed supervisor, to make sure that we had items correctly categorized for Tony and the correct prices. So everybody across the organization has been involved in that. That has something to do with the budget. And Tony has been instrumental and patient and helpful in that as well, because, I think the last meeting, Tony shared something. It seems insignificant to some degree in a budget this large, but it was an $11,300 item that was placed in the wrong spot in the budget, and that's a real a savings that, it's not even a savings, we never had to use that, but it was corrected. It cuts down on where we started some time ago, a couple weeks ago, showing you 16 million.
Right. Thank you. Mike.
Yeah.
I should be doing that.
This is just a question. Something you had said, I just want to make sure that I heard it correctly. In your projections going forward, that took into consideration retirements?
Yes, so savings on retirements. So we project,
May I also jump on that? We also ran a report that are in, and of course what Tony's modeling here, this slide with no tax increase, if he goes to the 2% slide, we ran reports and made projections based on folks in our organization, whether it's professional staff, support staff, administrative staff, to see who meets the requirements and who could retire over the course of the next 5 years. Now, we know we're not going to be exact on that, but we do have projections, and they're built into Tony's numbers here as well.
Another thing that's built into the numbers is the expected PSERS rate over the next 5 years. That is included in this. And it does go down next year, but it's predicted to go right back up the following year. So
I mean, I think what these numbers, what these charts, and with Mr. Tate's history, explains something, two things, I think, that are pretty clear, at least to me. Number one, as Mr. Solomon has indicated before, you can't do zero, right? Zero causes problems. The other thing that it says to me is that we are stuck effectively between a rock and a hard place. And this is where the rubber meets the road. We're largely looking at adjusting the revenue side in this bit. I understand we've controlled and we've pulled back some planned future expenses, but there's a lot of immovable objects in our budget between the contracts that we discussed, as well as the payments to people, right? And so there was left with very little to make that difference up. We have, in history, I guess, landed somewhere around 2.5% according to Mr. Tate's history. And so that's where, if you flip between a 2% and a 3% slide, that's kind of where things start to click. So I'm concerned that we are heading at some point into the situation where the only way to get out of the mess is continued tax increases and continued increases on those increases. And because we do have our expenses are increasing faster than our revenue, and the only way that we can change that is with a tax increase or adjusting our expenses. So that's I think where we're close.
And I think the Act 1 index is telling that tale, where it's increasing every year, and you know, we're not getting close to that, but it is, you know, it's not increasing for no reason. But what was I going to say? There are, you know, when we talk about the contracts, we've tried, you know, we've gone back and talked to third parties, and you know, we're hoping to get some motion, but I don't want to say it's too specific. But I did tell you last time that I would have the insurance numbers for you today, for not for medical insurance, but for liability and workers' comp. I don't have those numbers. I spoke with our consultant yesterday. It looks like, so it is budgeted to be higher. It does look like our liability insurance will increase. He will present next week to you, but it does also look like our workers' comp, our liability will increase pretty much where it's budgeted. Our workers' comp will actually be reduced over last year. So there's some savings that are going to come back in there. And also most of the other insurances are going to stay status quo with premiums, and like auto insurance. And so we do have some budget savings there because they were budgeted higher as well. But you know, I'll wait for that. And there's some things he wants to talk about regarding our liability deductible. We can look at that. There are some savings there if we want to look at that. But you know, that's for next week.
Thanks.
The sad part of this, my concern down the road, I don't know how near or far this is, but where this is going, I don't believe is sustainable. That sooner or later, we are going to be pricing our seniors out of this area. Unfortunately, because you have to continue to raise taxes, they're getting it on both ends from inflation. And, you know, and that's just not fair. But,
yeah, I would recommend looking at the referendum, and that's going to provide relief, because if our earned income taxes are going up, that's less we need from our real estate taxes.
It is a more fair tax in a sense. You know, why don't we, if you don't mind, move ahead, go through the remaining slides, and we can come back. We'll have to circle back.
Can I do one more thing that's related
Sure.
to the seniors? Because I mentioned it last time, and I saw you taking note. I would like the solicitor, if possible, either offline or at the next meeting to offer us guardrails or what the parameters are, because I know that Pennsylvania has already a tax relief for seniors that make, almost no money, Is there something that other school districts are doing? Because I hear yes, and then other people are telling me it's illegal. So I'd like to know what those ideas are, what other people are doing that's within, and that's more for the attorney to talk about. I'm sure it looks like you want to say something, but I just want to get on the record, and please let the board know, because I've asked about it multiple times, and I hear either some school districts are doing it, and others I hear it's an illegal thing, it's unfair, so to get a legal opinion on what, and just broad, we don't have to get into specifics, but I'd like to.
Do you know any districts that you're referring to?
I think I heard like Penfield or something, I don't know if that's true or not, and then I think I heard.
Is that consistent with Act 25 that Tony's talking about? You're not sure?
The Act 25, what you're talking.
Act 25 is I have the right act, correct,
I
Tony?
think so, yeah. Act 25.
That's the earned income tax that Tony was talking about.
Honestly, I don't, that's what I'm saying, like, what can we do to help as he says, we're gonna get these seniors, we're gonna cost them out of or charge them out, it's not gonna happen, we gotta figure out that.
Fair enough. All right.
I thank you.
Yeah.
So staffing considerations. You asked for our list of areas where we feel that positions are needed. I want to use the word wants, but these are the things that we were talking about, that we talked about adding prior to finding out where we stood with the budget. Assistant athletic director, assistant principals, and the assistant athletic directors with scheduling and management of athletic events and allows them to focus on students and academics. A cybersecurity manager, right now we have it outsourced, addressing increasing, obviously we all know there's increasing cybersecurity risks. And the manager would provide directions to technicians and makes management level decisions. A data analyst, generate reports for multitude of data, and a teacher on special assignment. And these are not, all these are in alphabetical order by unit. So this is the CRAA unit, and it's in alphabetical order by unit. There's no, each one is as important as the other. So when, it's just we'll get to it in the rationale. Next one would be the CREA, free elementary teachers reserve, the whole positions in reserve in the event that additional sections are needed after the June 1st deadline. 0.6 elementary gifted teacher. So the caseloads of the 2 elementary gifted teacher supports increasing each of their contracts from 0.7 to 1.0. ELD teacher support, to add 2 temporary ELD support positions to make them permanent and have them in the budget. Right now, they're not. They weren't in the budget that you've seen so far. A math specialist, that would allow 1 math specialist to be placed at each elementary school. 1 middle school gifted teacher to expand the gifted program at both middle schools. And a 0.2 STEAM specialist to increase that position from 0.8 to 1.0. More opportunity for the specialist to work with students. And then the last one is the CRESPA, one endpoint technician to have a high number of devices in the district, and it helps support that ratio of technicians to students and staff members. Also teacher assistants, free teacher assistant to hold 3 positions in reserve in the event of new student enrollments. And 2 security officers. We have increased presence of security officers, K-12, both during the school day and in evening hours for events and activities. And the state of things kind of suggests that that's important. So what we have or would like to put in the budget, and this is simply based on, this isn't based on anything else being more important, just what is the more pressing need at this time. for us to, what we need to add, make permanent that's more pressing need. And most of these additions will be partially offset through attritional savings. So we do have some reallocation of attritional, staff attrition that we will use to pay for a good portion of these items. So support staff, reallocate 3 support staff FTEs so that we can add the endpoint technician to support the devices in the district and the 2 security officers, just because of the pressing need of how things are in the world today. And then professional staff, a reallocation of 1.6 professional FTEs, the elementary teacher, a gifted elementary teacher at 0.6, and then a middle school teacher in the gifted program at 1, and then 2 ELD teachers, and they're both what we consider more pressing needs right now. And you will note that is where the kind of, most of it's offset, but this is kind of where we're in where it's not offset, where we have 1.6, but the teachers, ELD teachers. And then another important part of that is those are teachers that we did employ this year, but they were temporary employees. We'd like to make them permanent.
Yes, I have a question about that. On the chart before that, the ELD teacher support was listed as 0.2. It's actually 2 full-time?
Yes.
It is 2 full-time.
Yes, so it's 2 that are already, as Mr. Rapp said, 2 temporary ELD teachers that the board approved for this year. And we're looking to make them permanent because our numbers still support having those teachers working with our students.
Great, and just so that makes sense, and so that I understand, because it says ELD teacher support, these are not support professionals, these are actual teachers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add to that, we sat with you earlier in the year. We talked about students coming in. You graciously approved 2 long-term subs that were ELD teachers. You also approved 2 support staff, long-term substitutes. The ELD teachers fall under CREA, the support staff fall under CRESPA. And what we're saying here is that our numbers have not changed, and we believe that our kids are going to be best served to make those 2 teachers permanent.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the math specialist didn't make the cut this year?
The math specialist would have been, if we go back to the,
I saw.
okay.
It was considered, but is it not?
So,
Is that not part of, this is the final recommendation?
yes, I think if Tony were to go back to the previous 3 slides, as he said, we agree they're all important and all have merit. I think the differentiating factor is that we can function without these. We can still function with our 8.3 math specialist. And if you go to the slide where the recommendations are, Tony, if you don't mind, we're saying in order for us to function, our students would best be served right here with these recommendations.
Okay, and it's 1 FTE for the specialist. It's 1 FTE more.
Yes.
Full-time. Basically, it's another salary.
Correct.
Maybe next year, or throw it in there.
And that's presentation, correct?
Just one more.
One more.
So just to summarize what we're recommending in this budget, and these are the program improvements, program additions. We are adding a $2.1 million reading program. It will cost $1.2 million in 23-24. Our reading program hasn't been replaced in 12 years, so it really is time to replace the reading program. That's a necessity. And then the positions that we talked about, the elementary school gifted, middle school gifted, 2 ELD teachers, and then a technician and 2 security officers. That's
Thank you, sir. Very good. Floor is open. Anybody on the phone?
No, I'm good, Ed. Thank you.
Sure. Welcome, Lee.
I have a question. So when did it start that the schools, the public schools get the funds primarily from property taxes? Is it something that has been going on for a very long time?
I remember when I started working as a news reporter right out of college many years ago. That was one of the first things I heard about was the concern that we were running local government, including schools and municipalities, on property tax and how unfair that was to senior citizens and property owners on fixed income. I mean, it's a historical problem and it's been neglected.
No, it's, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I would just add to that, additionally, we are really at the mercy of the state, which to me has really gotten out of the business of funding public education and yet mandating programs and mandating how we provide education locally. So the state is really not a player in helping us budgetarily anymore.
There's always been talk of different ways to, like somebody said, oh, maybe if we raise the sales tax in the state to X percent, you can eliminate property taxes and all that, but that's above our, that's something that's at a state level.
To piggyback on Mrs. McKee's point, I believe the state funds Council Rock somewhere between $15 and $17 million of basic subsidies, and we've got a $260 million budget. And I believe there's a whole bunch of funding requirements of programs that come with that, that 15 to 17 doesn't even cover. And that's why we're finding ourselves in the 260.
There's talk now in the state about us funding other districts.
Yeah.
If I could, I would just warn that the last thing we want to do is for the state to collect our money and then distribute it how they see fit.
Yeah.
It's not going to work for us.
Well, and to Mike's point, what Bob was just alluding to, I think, was that Dr. Sanko, a federal court case?
Yeah, and there was a 760-some page opinion written on it. I understand it's being appealed right now.
Yeah.
The ruling was that educational funding in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional. So I think there's a lot of time and a lot of interpretation and a lot of discussion and perhaps appeals. And really, if that becomes the case, then as a school district, you lose control of how you do business. And I think to what Dr. Forward just said is the same thing. I don't think we want to lose control as the school board in Council Rock.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as unfair as this is, and I totally agree, it doesn't make sense to fine school board with property taxes. So a long time ago, these people who are now on fixed income, they were raising their families and they had free public education. And the people that used to be the retirees then, they had to support. So it's almost like that's something that continues happening. It's not that we're all of a sudden unfair to the people on fixed income. That has been going on for a long time. And then, of course, the people who are now on fixed income, they took advantage of the public schools when they were younger. So, I mean, it's just a continuum of unfairness, but at least it's the same unfairness throughout the years until this is fixed.
While we're mulling this over, Marianne, do you want to remind us about Monday night?
Yes, thank you. Monday, special education committee meeting, and we'll be reviewing and discussing the textbooks that are up for approval. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Another question. Bob, your recommended budget inclusions, what does that do to those numbers you presented previous?
They're in there.
So that's included in this.
So whatever, if Tony can go back to one of his.
Okay, that's fine. No, it's,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that this isn't an additional.
No, they're in there, and if, on that slide that had those, I think it was slide 21, you can go to 21, Tony. You can see that there is an offset through some attrition. It's not a one-to-one dollar correlation, it's offset. So we're still gonna have a spend here, but it's included in the numbers that Tony presented in all the models that he did, whether it was the 0, the 2, the 3, the 3.84, I think it was.
I mean, not so much for this year, but going forward, like, one of the things that, that I would maybe like to see is if we're gonna be adding positions, I would like to see where we're, I don't wanna say cutting positions, but maybe we don't need positions that.
You're seeing that right here. You're seeing that right here so, support staff reallocation of 3 support staff FTEs. So sometimes we have instructional assistants that are one-to-one assistants, and if that student matriculates through our system or that person retires, then that is a natural opportunity to realize a savings, and that's attrition. And we're taking an example like that and building it into an endpoint technician.
Yeah, because I would like to, like you said, it's built in there, but I don't want to say it, I want to see it. I would almost want to see, like, okay, this elementary gifted teacher that we are getting, this is the corresponding cut that we're making. As opposed to, I mean, it's in there, but I would like to actually see what that is. So, because, I mean, it's great, like you could say, well, because I don't want to, the one thing I don't want to see is, well, we had a couple more retirements that were unexpected, so, we can make that up with a couple more. I would rather see, as we try to control expenses, if we're going to add something, what are we cutting? Or, maybe the answer is we can't cut anything, but, at some point in time, that 75% has to be addressed.
And I think that's, we have to remember we're in the people business, and that the bulk of our budget or any school district budget it's the people, and then right outside of that, call it 77% for healthcare and benefits, or 80%. Outside of that, you have 20% of the pie left, or 18% or 22% that we're trying to squeeze things in. And then add on top of it some of our third-party contracts that we know that increase is going to go up, and that's really why these are hard discussions, and we need an input from everyone on it.
And you were telling us that you've had conversations with our major third-party vendors about cost.
Most major third-party vendors at this point, and we've been trying to meet with everybody that we can that has any kind of agreement with us, to talk about our situation, talk about inflation, talk about annual rates of increase. We just, this 2 days ago, I think it was, Tony, right? We just met with one of our largest third-party contractors. They've said to us they'll go back. We've asked them to try to sharpen their pencil. We've given some ideas where we think we can save money, and it would be a win-win, where we would do some things a little bit differently on our end, and ask them to do things a little bit differently on their end. And we'll continue to do that. Because, again, back to that $65 example, 65 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you start compounding them, pretty soon you're paying part of a light bill, you're paying for fuel in the van, or the inspection on the bus, or whatever. So I'm very proud of the way that everybody, administratively, and our coordinators have coalesced around this to try to move that number from 16 million when we first sat with you to where we are now.
And
it's not perfect, but we're.
So, and I think not right now, but in the future, there are 2 potential areas that we could reduce costs. One would be examine the healthcare premiums and see if we can get a better deal through the consortium. And the other is if we review the curriculum, right, over the summer, and see if we need to cut things that are not popular or they're not a good value for their students, because, I mean, the first priority is the highest possible quality of education, but if there is something that doesn't work and we remove it, that could be potential savings.
So if I may, 2 comments back. We spoke about looking at the healthcare consortium. I mean, our savings right now in that healthcare fund is 25 million. It's pretty substantial. So we have 25 million reasons of savings right there. But we will do that. We talked about beginning that work after we get through the June 30th deadline to get a budget passed. And then the second, the curriculum part of it with regards to our courses, our number of teachers, the number of students that are seen by those teachers. I'm going to pick on Al here for a minute because we've already started that work looking at, and Nicole as well. It's a little more complicated at the secondary level with the stratification of courses. But if the 2 of you can, or Al, jump in on that a little bit with where we are on some of that work.
About the coursework that we're just looking at the curricular piece to, right now collecting data about the number of courses that are offered elementary through secondary, and then also looking closely at the, for example, the elementary level, all the first grade classrooms at the elementary level, how many teachers instruct those classrooms, how many total students. And then that continuum goes all the way up to the secondary level in terms of the courses that are being offered, and I think that's a follow-up from last meeting.
So at the secondary level, it is a little bit more complex due to the stratification of courses. Everything's kind of governed by the course selection program planning process, where students select courses for the following year, and that really governs staffing and how we allocate staff. So as you might imagine, there's some flux that happens within the elective areas depending on what courses students are taking. Generally speaking, the core 4 areas, social studies, science, math, English, they have relative stability because they are required credits for students. But certainly we always are scrutinizing if there is an undersubscribed area, undersubscribed sections. We have regulations about class size, for example, the gifted, which you saw here tonight, 20-to-1 student to teacher ratio. So advanced placement courses, depending on classroom configurations and family and consumer science and technology engineering, you may have different class sizes. So we're taking we always look at that closely, but we're looking at that even more, I guess, both broadly and more in a granular sense to see if there was any, possibilities of capitalizing on some cost savings there.
And as Al said, that fluctuates particularly in the elective areas. Like we know over the last several years, the interest of our students has increased in family consumer science. But we also know we have a fixed amount of space and a fixed number of students that could take those electives. But what that does then, when that number of students choose FCS, then that means there's wiggle room or latitude in other elective areas. Conversely, if we didn't have family consumer science, all the students who would choose to take that, it wouldn't be available. They would kind of file into the other elective courses that are available to them. So,
I have a question, if I may. And I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but as we're talking about programs and staffing, do we have any indicators of how we're doing at MBIT? Do we expect more students to be taking advantage of their offerings there?
I don't, go ahead.
Our numbers going, I believe our numbers are increasing, but
We have,
are we seeing a
our
trend up?
trajectory is up.
Yeah.
I can't tell you an exact number right now. I know MBIT is filled. I know that with their budget, one of their goals was to add an additional teacher so that 25 additional students at least could participate in MBIT. I'll have to get you the exact numbers. I don't know what our total number is, but I do know it's we've increased over the last 3 or 4 years.
Which is why our costs are going. Yeah, they don't have the exact number. I believe the number of students for next year is 980, and up from like 940. And I actually asked the other day on how many people, how many students were rejected. Now, obviously, this is in 4 districts. I believe that number is 80, but it's expected to go down because you'll have some attrition or some people who won't go to the class. So you really won't know until September the actual number. But I think there's 80 students on a wait list, and the population is going up from, I believe it's like 940 or 950 to about 980. So it's going up. Where that comes into how many more Council Rock kids there are, I don't know that answer either.
I'll
But I
get
can find it.
And I don't even need more of an answer than that. I just wanted to be sure our numbers are increasing there. And again, I'm applauding that our kids are taking advantage of that program.
Go ahead.
Let me just make a couple comments. So Tony, thank you for the projections, because the projections are, I think, as I've learned from Andy Blocks of the world and Mark Bilex, that's how you really sit down and figure out where you want to be in terms of tax increases and what we can do better. Ms. Pally brings out a great comment tonight about fund balance. Wasn't that many moons ago that we had board members say, you don't watch yourselves, we're going to be broken and no fund balance. So some of those projections, and they could be that reality. I think, the work that Al and Nicole are doing is something I asked for a year ago. A lot of things happened last year, and I think this team is finally in place to do the look and the work that we asked for a year. So we have to, I'm at a point where I struggle with this time of year because I'm always thinking and always talking, and how can we do things with everybody in mind of what's best for the kids, because that's who we're here for, the kids. I think, when you look at the Act 1 index, they must know something. I don't think any of us want to put our head on the pillow and say we're going to raise taxes 16%, but that's basically where you need to be in a lot of ways, because the vision of the district, the vision of Dr. Sanko, in my opinion, is adding things that you can't add under this budget. But none of us, me included, are interested in that type of tax increase. So we're not the only district going through this. Neighbors to the left in Bucks, to the right in Montgomery County are all facing deficits. I think we're close to landing this budget. I don't know if we need to continue with the weekly meetings. That's up for you guys and the board to decide. But my concern is not June 30th. My concern is July 1st. What does next year's budget look like? How are we going to start shaping next year that we're not saying, well, cut this, take this, what about that, what about this? And I think the work that Nicole and Al, and I'll even throw in to Mr. Tate's point, as you're looking at the secondary, don't roll out a scuttle change if there's money saving there. The question becomes, what type of schedule would actually save money? But that's what you guys are thinking about. But, when you talk about programs, as Kelly talked about full day kindergarten, pretty hard to fit all day kindergarten into our budget. So there are visions of several board members, the community as a whole. There's some people out there that want their things, but this is the reality. Whether we're here in next year, the year after or not, boards in the next 5 years, we have contracts coming up. You're going to have the RFP, what we do private servicing, which to me may shock and awe us all where we're going to be. I've been on the phone with Dr. Sanko, I don't know how many times talking about budget. The one thing that he did not talk about tonight is we have 244 kids that are still in cyber charter. This administration is reaching out to every kid and every family that's in that list to bring them back home to Council Rock. And we're also checking to make sure they live in Council Rock. That's a big thing. It's easy to say you live here, prove you live here. Average cyber bill, $14,000 regular ed, $50,000 special ed. $2.4 million in cyber charter. Is that somewhere in that area?
143 total cyber charter school students currently. As of last week when we ran the report, 22 of whom are seniors. And we have cross-referenced every house. Of course, we have our security manager double-checking some that we want to be certain of. And you're absolutely right. It's almost $16,000 per regular ed student and $45,000 for every special ed student of Council Rock taxpayer money that's paying that cyber charter school. We had this discussion today in cabinet because we've moved things along so far that we will be sending a letter to all those families. We'll give it several days so they're not getting a cold call. And we're going to invite them in to meet with one of us at a cabinet level, with the building principal, with the counselor, whoever. We believe that we could take the best care of our kids here in Council Rock. So we'll work hard to get every one of those students back that we can.
And that's a big deal, because that's a number that I think we should be able to reduce. Because if you moved here, if you moved here for public education, you moved here for Council Rock on Cyber Charter. So let's get those folks back, or do our best to get them back. Another area that we're kicking a trash can over to actually find some cash that can go back into the budget. But I think, long term, there's a lot of questions. Where are we going to go? How are we going to get there? What is your vision? What is the administration's vision moving forward? How do we put that into the budget? Because, at the end of the day, whether you go 2, 3, 4, whatever the number is, we have to look at the taxpayer in the face and say, that's the right thing to do. And I think public education's at a crossroads right now. We have to decide on a lot of things and we're consistent. Like I said, there's many districts facing the same issues, maybe not to the degree as others, but the work that you're doing here is going to pay dividends. And I applaud you for taking on it. I just wish it was done, because I just wish it was done. But I appreciate the work, Tony. The 5-year projections makes life easier for a lot of us, because it gives you that variables that you build into it, which is very important.
One thing we talked about at the last meeting with the 5-year projection was, just having a base in there, and that's why Tony provided several models, a 1%, a 2%, a 3%, because then we know right now 1% is equal to $1.7 million. So, you could kind of just feel your way through each of those graphs and charts that Tony modeled out. And it doesn't get us in a spot of perfection, but it does give us a sense of what we're up against.
Thank you. A lot of good points, Ed. Let me remind everybody, we have a finance facilities meeting next Thursday. The following Thursday at our board meeting, we are to approve a preliminary final budget. That's May 18. Then we have another finance facilities meeting on June 15 and a school board meeting on June 20. And of course, our deadline is June 30. So hopefully we're passing the budget on June 22nd. So what do you want? What could the board provide to the administration tonight that would help move forward the conversation?
I think the most important thing that I need is where this board thinks they will fall on a tax increase. As I said, I would not want, I would ask for at least 2%. I think we demonstrated that there is an effect in future years for more than that. And in keeping, reductions down, not having to raise it as much in the future. I get that it's money now as opposed to years down the road, but I would ask 2% would I said 2% would get me a little over $3 million, would kind of have me around $3 million in fund balance. Another 0.2% in that area would be close to an additional 500, so we're not all the way up against that $3 million limit I suggested. So, and again, the more we do now, the less we have to worry about in the future.
Can I ask, so all these positions that we originally, throughout the year, we said we really should have this, and it's part of Dr. Sango's vision, if I understand, of providing the best possible education. Are these in the budget at all? No, none.
So they were included, most
Except
of
for
those
us.
were included when we sat here and said we were 16 we had a deficit of 16 million. They were included in there. So some of those things, the math specialist, Matt, do you mind going back to the 18, 19, slide 18, 19? Go back one more. Oops, go forward one more, thanks. So all of these, we feel are important, right? As Tony explained, we alphabetize them, we find them important, but we have been operating without them and operating in a good way for kids. It would make things a little bit more optimal. I mean, we have, as Tony said, we have assistant principals at both high schools performing that role and the athletic director role, which is a heavy lift. We believe it would be important to have a cybersecurity manager. We have a contract, a healthy contract with a third party right now that works with Matt. So, that's maintained in the budget that Tony put in front of you tonight. This ask would have been to make them a part of the Council Rock team rather than a third party vendor. The data analyst, the work that you've all seen that Tom Barnes has done to drill down into data and into test scores. We feel that's important and that could directly impact the classroom. And each one of these things we feel have a significant degree of importance. The slide on number 21, again, 21, thanks, Matt. We just believe these we need to be functional. We know that the number of ELD students that we've received, there has not been a decrease like we thought could happen. We all know the way of the world right now, and we talked about additional security managers to help with evening hours. Our buildings are open, most nights till 11 o'clock at night, and having extra help during the evening hours, and as well as the elementary schools during the days. And then, the elementary gifted teacher, the middle school gifted teacher, the board approved the change and the improvement in the gifted program. And as Al said earlier, there's a maximum caseload. So our students, if we have more gifted students, we need more teachers of the gifted. And so we know the caseload of at least 2 of our elementary teachers of the gifted has increased. So we have more students in that program, we have to support them. And then with the addition of the expansion of the gifted program, we need a teacher to share between both middle schools. Does that help?
And then you mentioned the other day that you discussed with the police departments and there's no change in the...
Yeah. Can we just hold that to the Safety and Security Subcommittee if you don't mind? Please, thanks.
No, because I thought it was on the, wasn't it? We discussed it.
We discussed MOUs at a finance facility a while ago. Yeah, just if we could do the details of it. Thanks.
Got one more comment, Mr. Daly?
Please.
So the conversation on the EITs and the earned income tax was an interesting conversation, because I've had that conversation. In 2013, it was shot down. I'm not so sure if it wasn't marketed right, if people ever anticipated, if it was just, I don't know. I can't remember. I would ask.
Yeah.
But I would like to talk to some prior board members who were around back then, Mr. Tate.
Yeah.
Not you, but
Good idea. No.
you know what I'm thinking of.
Yes.
And just get a semblance of where it either went wrong or are we missing the mark.
Right.
Revenue sources are limited coming into the district. Changing EIT, in my view, would really just right the ship and actually tax people that are actually either have kids in the school or relatively just out of school, so to speak. But it would also most likely, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, would most likely help us in terms of talking about real estate tax increase all the time. If we can start seeing that revenue coming from EIT expand it a little more, if you will.
Again, the first year, it probably
gonna be a
would,
wash.
it would be a wash. But after that, as our earned income tax would increase at a, there's a
And
higher
you could,
rate.
I think you could almost guesstimate what it would even look like, basically, you already know what we're getting now for you guys.
Yes.
So I think that's something the board should factor in the back of their head, and, we can quietly talk to our friends in the townships and whatever, but I think, that's something worth looking at.
Well, what kind of increase are we talking
I don't have that number, and I don't want to, it's not something I want to.
I mean, to become major over like the real estate, that would be like a huge increase. Nobody's gonna prove that.
You're not gonna replace the
You're not
real
gonna
estate
replace real
tax.
estate.
You're just, instead of raising the real estate tax,
But that's major every year. I mean, this is a big part with 160 million.
Well,
I
yes.
mean, it would have to be a pretty significant increase in the income
Well,
tax.
What is
we're
our
not-
EIT
we're not-
now?
Yeah.
What's our EIT number? 1%.
Yeah, well, no, it's 1%.
Well, what do we see?
We see 0.5%.
No, how much?
Oh,
dollars?
so again, 22 was an outlier, 22 was sort of an outlier year. 2023, I don't, again, it's hard to predict, I'm trying to, and we're budgeted at 19 and a half.
19 and a half.
Yeah.
Occupational tax would take a flat $4 million.
$4 million.
So even if you grab anything north of $4 million, remember, EIT tax is based on your earnings. So somebody making X amount of dollars would be taxed from that, which is real dollars because it's their earning dollars, as opposed to the flat rate occupational tax, which you just said hasn't been changed in 30 years.
No, I understand that part, but in order to avoid tax increases because of that, you will have to substantially increase the EIT.
You can't increase the EIT rate, it's just that the EIT rate would increase naturally. We would get more of a natural increase.
No, I'm not increasing the 1%, you say 2%.
Well, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can
So how would
only increase.
What would the referendum be about?
Because your earning goes up annually. So the more, if you make $100 this year, we collect EIT, right? If you make $150 next year, we collect EIT, but because you made $150 next year, we've collected more than we did the previous year.
No, but the 1% is local. Like, Pennsbury, I don't know, who, like, they don't have the 1%. They do?
That's
Because
this year, Falls Township.
Falls Township doesn't have it. And then
They do have it.
No, they don't have it. I was just talking to somebody that
No,
lives there,
Falls
and
doesn't.
they're talking about putting it in, and people don't like it.
No, it's already approved. The
It's
Falls
already
Township.
approved?
Yeah, because they lost they lost money from Waste Management.
Okay.
So the essence of where I see this is when you talk about saving money for our seniors, if we can reduce real estate costs or taxes, and only the tax would go up for the people working, because EIT is not for the people that are on.
That's our question, how are you raising the tax, how are you raising the rate?
Yeah, I mean, to
Income
do
tax.
that, to be able to provide enough there, so you don't have to increase the real estate tax. Maybe we can do some kind of analysis, but I'm afraid that's going to be such a big percent increase, and nobody's going to vote for
I
that.
think,
That's why they
I
voted
think,
down last time.
yeah, I think that's clearly for next year.
Yes. it's not-
So I asked Mr. Rapp what would be helpful to the administration to move this conversation forward. And his reply was for us to give some indication as to what the board is thinking in terms of a tax increase. We could see who wants to start the conversation, or I could start with the gentleman on the phone. Does anybody wish to?
Mike had to drop because he was driving and keeping my phone.
Okay.
I would say, I would suggest, it's up to you, that something maybe that we can think about and maybe
we
call
need,
each other.
we need to start the conversation now so that we're not sitting here this time next year saying the same thing. Correct? And like you said, what do we get, what did you say, 1% of real estate tax, what does that equate to in dollars?
1,700,000.
Right, so as long as you're getting more than $1.7 million in other revenue from people who are actually working, then maybe next year you don't have to raise taxes on the seniors that 1%. And if it's more than that, then you don't have to raise 2%, you know? So at least the people who are seniors now, they're paying a flat rate. I mean, it's not gonna go down. I mean, I don't think, you know, that's not a reality. But at least the people who, they'll know from now until for the next 10 or 15 years that their real estate taxes aren't going to go up, and it'll be people who are actually working who will be paying more taxes, which kind of makes a little more sense, you know, as opposed to the people who are on fixed incomes. I know they got the advantage for all those years when their kids are in school. I mean, I'm one of them. I probably got the biggest benefit than most anybody in this district from that. However, at some point in time, if I'm on a fixed income in 10 years, when everything else is going up, it's going to hurt. It doesn't matter that I got the benefit now. How am I surviving in 10 years from now? And it's the same thing that the seniors are facing now. So it's not like, oh, well, you got the advantage, so rough, now you can pay. That's not, in my opinion, that's not fair to any senior. You know, it's just, you know, anything we could do to help them, you know, I would be willing to at least have that conversation, like you said, at least start the conversation.
And it's not fair for people who are in the district and they don't have children, but they have to pay even more income tax. I mean, if you think it's pocket, it's like separately, it's a lot of unfairness.
But if we're offering a great quality education to our students, and it's one of the best districts in the state, which it is, one of the arguments that I always heard from people walking around is, well, that keeps our property values high, that keeps our, you know, everything high. So at one point in time, when I do sell my house or move, or the other outcome that, you know, my house is going to be worth something to someone who's going to want to move into this district because of the great educational opportunities that it offers.
Agreed. Mary Ann.
Thanks. Been dying to jump in on this. Since I belong to a certain demographic and never had kids in the district, and very arguably have benefited hugely from my experience, my profession, and living in the district. And I know none of us raise taxes easily. We're all struggling with this because we are sensitive to the needs of our neighbors, and trying to apply things fairly and not overly burdened folks. I know that we're all very sensitive to that. I'm also really satisfied from the past number of meetings that you have so done your homework. You've made your case. I've seen where you've found savings. You've cut where you can cut. You've held on to what you feel is necessary to provide the programming that we expect. So in order of, to answer your question, if you're recommending the 2%, I'm okay with your recommendation going forward. If we can do better, that would be wonderful. But after all of the presentations and all that I've heard, if that's where you're landing, I can be supportive of that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think we have definitely reduced the amount of money that we're planning to spend. We've also made some cuts, but I would like to, I mean, if I'm planning to go to the store and spend $100, and I actually only spend 80, I didn't cut $20, I just didn't spend the full 100. So that's what we've done a lot. I'd like to see some more efficiencies. I think there's still some efficiencies somewhere in this. That was my hope with the curriculum review. I think that going after some third-party contracts and seeing what we can do there, hopefully we'll find some as well. I think you're close. But I don't like the idea of spending fund balance, needing to spend fund balance. I'm okay with spending some fund balance under the conclusion that conservative budgeting is going to replace it. So by the time that the year wraps and gets audited, we actually didn't spend the fund balance, it's been replaced. That's effectively what we did last year. And I would rather spend out of the fund balance than to raise taxes to find out that we just got a lot more money than we thought we were going to get. I realize that we're always going to get more money than we thought we got because of conservative budget. But when you find, like, for example, a couple of years ago, 10, and last year, 8, right? That's putting a big burden, asking the taxpayer to come in like a cavalry and foot more bills. So for me, I'd like to see some more cuts or efficiency, I suppose is better, before I can give any indication of a rate.
Can I just ask, Doctor, is there anything major next year? We were, the reading program's a lot of money this year. Is there anything that you know on the radar that reaches that level of expense?
Well, we will be, and I don't know a dollar on this, but we're constantly looking and refreshing, renewing, materials, curricular materials. There'll be expenditures on that. I don't know that they'll reach the numbers that we've seen tonight and that you've seen before in those numbers.
That's $500,000. Sure, it's like half of it's run its course. You won't have that next year. If you didn't have it this year, you're at $2.5 million of fund balance and a 2% rate.
Yeah, if we stay with the current reading program that's 12 years old.
No, I'm saying it's time to change it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's.
Well, I'm just saying by example, right? I mean, that's a big swing.
Mm-hmm. But that's also in your plan in terms of, much like Doug's book, having the curriculum update of when things are needed and then building that into the projections so nothing is, not blindsided. We don't say this. I like the path that they're going. The $3 million is a big pill for me to swallow this year, but in light of last year's budget and in light of the amount of work that Tony and Bob had put in fixing all the problems with last year's budget, I feel better with this team. And it is what it is. My concern is that when you start cutting in areas, I want an analysis before we cut. I don't want it willy-nilly. So I'm in the ballpark with you. I think you've done a lot of work on this, the team collectively. The $3 million is a big one for me to swallow. 2% I think is smart, and you talked about consistent.
Yeah, predictable.
2% is still 2%. I get it. What is the number then? If it's not 2%, other districts are talking about full Act 1 index, and that's just to get buildings. It's nothing to do with education, pay their bills. So I'm in the ballpark. I'm pretty close. I really am, and I appreciate it.
I would like to add, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, but part of there's a smaller issue that makes the process a little more difficult. Is certain things were removed from the budgeting process that would make it easier to analyze things, and I will be implementing those things in next year's budget process. It was too late to do that this year, but we will be expecting a lot more detail from what we receive in the business office. So there's more. So I was not happy with the amount of analysis that I was able to do because of things that were removed from that process. But I'm going to make sure that is added next year's budget process. You're probably going to start hearing me talk about the budget in September. So
that makes good sense.
And what we're adding and what we're looking at, and also there's some inefficiencies in our accounting system as far as identifying expenses, and I would like to. It's not going to be a one-year process, but I would like to find things and iron out the process. So I feel like finding efficiencies, we've done, this team I feel has done a great job finding efficiencies this year. I feel we can do a better job next year as we have more information.
Yeah, I mean, you look around the table, and this administrative team has not been in place for a year. So I think next year's budgeting process will probably look considerably different. Steve, do you have a comment or question?
He might have dropped off there.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the reassuring part of this that I can take home, is the work being done, the conversations that I know I'm personally having every day with Dr. Senko and Mr. Roosevelt. We talk often, 2 times, multiple times a day. It's a hard pill to swallow, $3 million, but if we don't give the team the tools to do it, then where are we going? And if we're at a point where we want to talk about efficiencies, that I want efficiencies that are long-term efficiencies, not just to get a budget closed. And I don't think that happens in the next 30 days. So again, I'm in the stadium with you guys. I think what I'm hearing is what I wanted a year ago, and it's coming to fruition. You're looking at things, we're collectively talking about it as a team. The community needs to know that we're all working together to get things done, and not just saying that. We're spending the time doing it, and that's having a conversation about it in September. I mean, yeah, it's refreshing.
It's a much better way to go about it. Yeah, I would say just 2 things real quickly. I'm glad you made a lot of those points, Ed, and one of the things that I've said before, and I'll repeat, and I think I learned it from Bill Stone. I was just thinking about this. It really sunk in for the first time when Bill explained it in a way that was clear. Whatever you forego in a given year in terms of tax increase, you can't make up. That is a base to your millage rate that is not going to be made up in subsequent years without drastic tax increases. So it's not as though you could say last year our tax increase was 1.25%. That was low. It's not something we're going to make up. It has a compounding effect. So I think we should keep that in mind. And what I heard from Mr. Rapp was 2% is the minimum in order to responsibly budget for this district.
I disagree with that. I mean, for me, this is not a fiscally responsible budget, because at 2%, you are in, and I know you said you're going to have more revenues, but just looking at that, you're eating up all your fund balance in the next few years. I mean, that, to me, that's not.
That's why I said minimum.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not fiscally responsible making the assumption year after year that you're going to get more revenues than what you budget. But, I mean, maybe that happened in the past. We have no idea where we're going to end up this year. I mean, we have no idea. We may be under, for as far as I know, so we may need to dip more into the fund balance. And you just made the point that if you miss whatever percent, they have to increase the tax, they have to carry it throughout. So, I don't know, this doesn't look very fiscally responsible to me in terms of that.
Well, I think
I would not feel good, voting for a 2% under this, dipping into the fund balance over time. I mean, wasn't that Bob Reinhardt, he was here, he told us all, do not dip into your fund balance. He made that very clear. And that's what we're suggesting to do. I just don't feel comfortable at this point doing that. I mean, you asked everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
I mean, that's where I am right now.
I see what you're saying. I would throw a couple things in here in that. Again, part of the reason why I'm really not trusting any estimate I make for this year is because of where we were with the budget and where expenses went. There should be no surprises in this budget. We're not going to have a surprise in transportation. We're not going to have a surprise in substitute teachers. Those, for the most part, those things shouldn't, are we going to be perfect? No, but we're not going to be where we were going into the school year with this budget. Again, there's, I can list for you, I don't want to, but I can list for you a bunch of places where we budget conservatively, and there's a very, very good chance that we're going to do better this year than we budgeted. But I don't want to necessarily want to say all those things but those are good budgeting techniques that lend themselves to that type of improvement. I mean, I will say I have discussed the use of fund balance with Bob Reinhardt, and him and I together came to that. Keep it under 3 million. The closer we are to under, that is a recommendation, and with the thinking that we would do better overall than we would on the budget. And remember, our budget is what's telling us what to spend, and we're looking at what we think we're going to get. But I can't budget based on what certain things I'm going to get from the state. I can't budget that because I don't know at this point. We're going to probably pass the budget before Harrisburg knows that. So I can't budget those things. So, certain things we will budget based on what we received last year, knowing that we're going to get a decent amount more next year. So I don't want to say I'm 100% sure that we're going to do better than this budget in the end, but I also don't want to say, I don't want to say that there's not, that I know I'm hedging here, but I don't want to state that we're going to finish. It's a reasonable chance that we're going to do better.
Question. It's something that Joe mentioned earlier, and I don't know if you can even do it, and this is something after the budget, this year's budget is over. But like Joe was saying, for example, like right now we're 80% into our budget, but we've only spent 70% of our revenue or whatever that, and I think Joe threw the number of, $80 million, and there's going to be 12. If you just go on a month-by-month thing, there's $12 million extra, which I don't think you can do apples to apples. But is there any way to historically, and as I said, I don't want this, like, not right now, historically, if we could go through, like where we were in March in years and then where we ended up in June? Because the one thing that I don't want to do is, and this happened the last 2 years, we raised taxes, and then all of a sudden, when everything's said and done, there's an extra $8 million laying around or an extra $10 million laying around. And I know you always want to be conservative, but, like I said, I don't want to say to a taxpayer, hey, here's 3%, and then come June 30th, oh, by the way, we got an extra $10 million in our pocket, and I don't know if there's any way to historically look at like where we were at this point in time when we have to do our budget and where we were like at the end. Like last year was $8 million. The year before I think it was $10 million. I know you had COVID the years before that, but maybe going back to say like, you know what? It seems like every year that we end up having this extra money in the pot, and in the meantime, we're taxing the taxpayer,
Yes.
And as I said, I don't want to do, your plate is, like everybody else's, is full, but maybe something that we could look at as soon as this budget year has passed.
Well, I would say I did try to do that. So I did try to look at 22's position at the end of March and compare it to where we're at the end of March now and compare that. And the numbers were, at the end of March it was $1 million surplus. At the end of April it was a $30 million surplus. And I would like, I could spend, it'd probably take me a couple days to spend going through, as Mr. Hidalgo suggested, trying to figure out where we're going, what our retirement payments are going to be for, you know, what we're going to have to accrue for the various things. And I could probably get reasonably close on that. But then there's also a whole slew of accounts payable items, so bills that we get in July and August. That's going to be really hard for me to predict, and I've audited you. It's very different from year to year. It's very different.
Yeah, because I mean, not only am I concerned about the taxpayer, on the flip side of it, I don't want to see anything educationally ever cut.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, unless, of course, it is something frivolous, but I mean, you know, I mean, we offer a great education, we've got great teachers, you know, I don't want to lose any of that, so I understand that, I know it's 75% of the revenue, but like you said, somebody said tonight, we're in the people business, and, you know, our teachers do a great job, we provide a great education, so I want to make sure that we continue to do that in a fiscally responsible way.
Thank you. So I just wanted to put things in perspective. I always like doing Excel sheets, and this one came in clearer than ever, I think. So this is cool. Each one of your projections here for the expenditures is the same on each thing, and it's like a 2% increase each year. It kind of varies, but it's floating around 2. It actually increases every year, 2.2, 2.3, 2.31. But that's on the $257 million budget, right, this year. And so our taxing ability is, that amount is $164 million. So we're literally trying to keep, so what I'm saying is we have a smaller pot that we have control over to make up a 2% difference. So if your budget goes up by 2%, but you only have, you know, a third, 2/3 of that to go, then you really have to increase the budget like 3% to keep up with the 2% if everything else stays the same.
Right.
You know, that means your earned income tax, the real estate transfer tax, the occupational tax, leaving that out, which the hope is always that increasing salaries are going up. If everything's going up, everybody's making more money, but that's still $20 million. That if you go up 10%, that's $2 million. That helps, but it's not going to keep it with what we're doing. So I just wanted to say for everybody's, because I've never really heard it before, is basically we've got 2/3 of the pot that we can control by increasing that revenue to make up for the whole enchilada, which is a third bigger. So like a 2% increase in the budget would have to be covered with a 3% tax in general. So we've been pretty good. So somehow it works out because we have not increased our tax rate, real estate tax rate, even close to what the budget's been going on to, and somehow it works out. I'm still trying to figure that out. And how do we get that surplus?
Well, there is also a built-in increase in assessed value. So that does, you know, your assessed value increases every year. So that does produce, and that's included in this budget. So there's more than just the tax increase movement.
That's included, the assessed value?
That's included in the projection without tax increase. That's probably the largest increase in revenue on the assessment.
And how do you, is it renewed every year, or do you know, do you know what it's going to be, or do you find out in like?
We find out in January.
January?
So
for the next month?
So that, you know, based on the county's tax year, so we find out in January, and then those are, and then any assessment, you know, that's a general assessment, and then there's assessment changes that occur between January 1st and when our tax bills are out, so.
Is that included in this revenue projections, the increase in assessment?
Yes, it's like I said, about 0.1%.
That's basically all at 1.1.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Go ahead, Tony.
0.1, not 1.1.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Public comment?
I have a comment. So I know we talk about a lot of different things. I just want to say thank you to Tony and then the whole team, because it has been so much work, and we are such a much better place than what we were like, even like a few months ago. So, and I have the confidence that we can make things happen going forward. And it's a lot of hard work, so really, really thank you.
All right. And we're adjourned.
Yay.
No public comment, no public comment?
I asked. Yes, I asked.